Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. These are our headlines from across the continent this evening. South Africa has begun to ease its coronavirus lockdown. Some industries have now reopened after major economic turmoil as a result of the stringent measures. The NGO Save the Children says urgent aid is needed in East Africa as millions of children risk severe malnutrition in the coming months. A plague of locusts, amongst other problems, has led to a looming crisis. We'll talk to the humanitarian director of Save the Children in Ethiopia. He was one of the most celebrated drummers in the world. The Nigerian Afrobeat legend Tony Allen has passed away at his home here in Paris. We'll get a flavour of his rich legacy a little later on in the show. Thanks for watching France 24's Eye on Africa. Now, South Africa has started easing its lockdown as of today, Friday. Restrictions have helped to limit the spread of coronavirus, but the economy took a hard hit, and many are facing food shortages as a result of the measures. Ructions were also caused by the authorities insisting that alcohol could not be sold during the lockdown. But the month of May is auguring in a gradual reopening of businesses. France 24's Shirley Sipon has more.
This is Johannesburg under the strict lockdown. This was Johannesburg before the coronavirus crisis started. Authorities want the city and the whole country to be somewhere in between, partially open for business. About 1/3 of employees will be back at work starting today. Because although the lockdown helped limit the number of infections, it has hit the economy.
For millions of others, this has been a month of misery, of breadwinners not working, of families struggling to survive, and of children going to bed and waking up hungry.
Families like the ones living in this area near Cape Town. Many have lost their jobs and now depend on food aid.
For now, when I get this food, now I feel better because I'm not working. Everything is stopped now because of this coronavirus. I'm feeling good today when I get some food. The children are going to get something on the table.
The IMF estimates South Africa's economy could shrink this year by 5.8%. South Africa's lockdown is one of the strictest in the world, enforced by the police and army. With the easing of rules, residents will now be able to do some exercise, but they will not be allowed to buy cigarettes or alcohol, which remain banned.
The humanitarian organisation Save the Children is calling for urgent aid in East Africa, warning that millions of children are at risk of severe malnutrition. Now, a second wave of desert locusts could decimate crops and add to the struggle to feed already malnourished children in the region. Now, to discuss that, we're joined by Matthew Sugru of Save the Children in Ethiopia. Matthew, thank you for talking to us. It is a cliche, but this is biblical stuff, isn't it? A plague of locusts and a second wave at that, on top of concerns about COVID-19, which has disrupted food supply. It sounds like a perfect storm. Can you tell us more about the conditions in the Horn of Africa right now?
Yeah, thank you for that. It really is a perfect storm, I think, of the locusts, the second hatching coming in May, and then the swarms to be in June and July, which in Ethiopia will be the harvest season, and then again in Somalia and Kenya also being affected by the locusts. With the COVID and the impact, the economic impact of COVID on top of that across the region, and then of course the climate impacts, the effects of climate change and flooding across the region as well. And this really will add up and increase the vulnerability of already vulnerable children, their families and communities.
Now, some emergency measures have been taken, have they not? For example, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, they've received donations of some $150 million to help governments in the region. Is it a case of, is it too little too late? Or how would you assess the current situation despite that extra aid coming in?
I think additional aid is never too late, and it's always needed, and it's always helpful. And you're right, the FAO and the UN are working on the locust and the control efforts, as well as looking to increase assistance across the region for communities affected by the outbreaks, as well as the climate change impacts.
Now, you're in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, I presume. This is affecting the whole of the Horn of Africa. I presume some areas worse than others. Can you give us a sense of that in terms of region to region, country to country?
Yeah, so in Ethiopia alone, we have currently 8 million people in need of food assistance. And just from the previous outbreak of the locust that you mentioned before, we're seeing an increase of about 1 million people likely in need of additional food assistance. With the COVID on top of that, we're predicting those numbers to go up even higher, as well as with the next outbreak of an infestation of locusts in Ethiopia. Across the region, we're expecting to see a potential of doubling of people in need of food assistance from 20 million to up above 40 million, and that's across the Horn of Africa and East Africa.
All right, it really is an awful prospect. Matthew Sugru of Save the Children, thank you for that, and let's hope that the required assistance can be brought to bear for that situation. Now to Gabon next, where many residents of the capital, Libreville, are struggling with a shortage in water supply. COVID-19 precautions and an increased focus on hand washing means that water is in higher demand than ever. Now, to meet that demand, the government has launched a free water distribution operation for a large number of the city's 800,000 inhabitants. Our team on the ground sent us this report.
Waiting in line for a few litres of drinking water, it's a daily struggle in many parts of Libreville. Water is scarce in the city of 800,000 inhabitants, but also crucial for hand washing during the COVID-19 pandemic.
On nous demande de laver les mains constamment. On nous a pas distribué aussi ni des gels alcooliques, ni aussi l'eau pour laver les mains. Donc la santé va passer par nous.
This much-awaited tanker truck drives to the city every day. It supplies several areas of the capital where lockdown measures have been eased. The government is behind this free water distribution program as it attempts to stop the spread of the coronavirus. But there's not enough for everyone.
Ils exigent 3 bidons, donc 60 litres par ménage. C'est pas suffisant, 60 litres. Qu'est-ce qu'on fait avec 60 litres? L'eau n'arrive pas dans les maisons. Il faut aller puiser. Il y a des fontaines publiques un peu plus bas et une seule qui n'a que 2 robinets pour toute une cité.
In this area here is the public fountain where Jidekal comes every day to fill his water cans. Then he'll sell that water to families already affected by the COVID-19 economic crisis.
Le bidon, quand je fais comme ça, là, c'est 250. Je quitte de chez moi à 10 heures pour essayer de commencer à ravitailler les gens l'eau. Et je peux terminer à 18 heures et quelques, puisqu'il y a le confinement. Il faut respecter l'heure.
Those who don't have enough money, like Alexandre, are struggling to get water at home. He uses his wheelchair to reach the public fountain. Few bottles, barely enough for a couple of days.
Donc voilà comment est-ce que nous, on se débrouille, on se bat pour avoir cette eau.
Only 2/3 of Libreville's water needs are met, the water shortage compounding the ongoing health crisis.
Sudan is to ban female genital mutilation. According to UN data, almost 90% of women and girls have undergone genital mutilation in Sudan. Women's rights groups have lauded the move. The new law states that anyone who performs female genital mutilation will risk a fine and 3 years in prison. 10 Egyptian soldiers were either killed or wounded in a blast targeting an army vehicle in the northern Sinai. The attack occurred on the outskirts of Bir al-Abed. An Islamist insurgency is ongoing in the region. No group has immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, but according to the army, 2 suspected jihadists have since been killed in response. The legendary Nigerian Afrobeat drummer Tony Allen has passed away at the age of 79 here in Paris, his long-time home. Now, his death was sudden, but not linked to the current pandemic. Allen is credited with being one of the original Afrobeat artists, along with his old bandmate Fela Kuti. France 24's Florence Villeminot has more.
In the 1960s and 70s, Tony Allen was the drummer, but also the musical director of Fela Kuti's band Africa 70. At the time, the two of them combined West African music styles with US jazz and funk and created Afrobeat. And Afrobeat went on to become one of the most influential genres in 20th century African music. Over Tony Allen's powerful beat, Fela Kuti laid out his revolutionary message and went on to become one of the lasting icons in the struggle for freedom across the continent. Now, together, Tony Allen and Fela Kuti recorded some 40 albums together, and when Tony Allen ended up leaving the band, well, apparently he was replaced by 4 drummers because his technique was so incredible. Now, Allen actually taught himself to play the drums when he was 18 years old and drew inspiration from US jazz legends like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. Later in his career, he became a much sought-after collaborator, working with younger musicians such as Jarvis Cocker, Charlotte Gainsbourg, Sébastien Tellier, and he also played in a lot of supergroups, alongside, for instance, the Clash bassist Paul Simonon, as well as Blur's Damon Albarn and the Red Hot Chili Pepper bassist Flea. Now, he had just released an album called Rejoice, which was a collaboration with the South African trumpet player Hugh Masekela, who passed away in 2018.
The first time I met him, Hugh Masekela, was in Nigeria, whilst I was still working with Fela. From 75, he started coming to Fela's place. Every time we meet, discussing music, You know, go jumping, go party, go dancing, go lovely, go jumping, go party, go dancing, go lovely. Hey!
She's too modest to say it, but Florence Vimino, a pretty mean drummer herself. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. R.I.P. Tony Allen, and thanks for watching Fast from Forza in Africa.